Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to offer up some suggestions and some guidelines for peer review. Your major task this week early on, in addition to working on your own photo essay, right, is to respond to a peer's photo essay. And so my approach for that is threefold, right? The first is that you'll get great feedback from a peer, right, in return for yours. Two, the guidelines or the protocol that I'll have you go through for peer review will help you understand exactly what I'm looking for. So I think you'll have a better idea of what I want. And then third, it's just really cool to be able to look at somebody else's photo essay. You'll have such amazing ideas and they're coming together really well. So it might help you think about your essay in a different way too. So I want to give you some guidelines because I feel like, sorry, I think I get this by now. Okay. Because I feel like peer review is one of those things that we do and we have done all the time, but I feel like there's normally very little structure to how they're done. And so I feel like that leads to kind of negative feelings towards peer review or ideas that peer review can't be helpful or it's just a waste of time. And I really want to challenge that because I think reading and responding to someone else's work can be a really wonderful and generative experience. So I want you to think back to times when you've done peer review and thinking of sort of things that have not been great and things that have been great. And if this were a live class, I would ask you to share those examples. So if you can just think of them, and I'll share a couple of my own. So I can tell you that I didn't learn about peer review as a practice, as a way to respond and learn until I was teaching writing. And as somebody that took a lot of English classes when I was in school, I definitely did peer review quite a few times. And I will tell you that I don't remember ever getting any sort of instruction other than respond to your peer's paper. Like I have very vivid memories of being in high school and you just, you take your paper and you pass to the left and it's like, read your peer's paper and respond. And I mean, that's fine, but sometimes, right, you would get something back and it's just marked up completely. And it is one, very discouraging. And two, just sometimes this is not that helpful. Or my other favorite is when you get something back and it's got a smiley face and says all good because the person didn't want to do it or didn't know what to say. And I think that's oftentimes what happens because if you're just told respond, it's very hard to know what to do with that. So I want to give you some guidelines, but first let's look at the folder. I want to give you some logistical advice here. So you can see into the future. So, last week you posted your rough draft and then this week you're going to do your peer review. So if we open the folder, I'll just take you through the instructions very briefly. I'm not going to read them to you or anything, but essentially what you're going to do or what you should have already done, actually, sorry, that's what's hard about like recording ahead of time. You'll be creating a folder in here that has your name on it and you've already uploaded your essay to it. After that, you will pick somebody, right? So I would look and see whose folder has stuff in it. Go ahead and write your name next to that person or comment or whatever. And then you will, rather than just responding to them, you have two guides for responding to them. So the first is that they've written you a little note, right? With questions and things to consider. So I want you to read that note before you look at their essay, because that way you kind of know what they're thinking about. And sometimes I think we know our work the best. Sometimes we need to step away from it, but oftentimes I think we know it the best. The second thing is you will fill this sheet out. So again, you'll make a copy of it. You won't edit it directly. So you'll read through your peer's essay, look at their note that they left you. And so you get to respond directly to them at the end, but you're also going to go through this process. And so this has questions that we discussed in our first meeting and also are kind of incorporated into the rubric, right? So you're going to go through this. You'll notice you can say things that are positive and things that might need more work. Then you get to give them sort of three big major suggestions, right? And then you can respond to their question. So this is a way to sort of guide you rather than just saying, respond, because that's, again, it doesn't always help very much. So logistically, that's what we're doing. So let's talk a little bit about best practices for peer review. So remember, you're there to respond, not to edit, and not to revise it. You're not there to do their work for them. You're there to offer feedback. Let me mute my phone. I got a new phone and the button is in a different spot, so sorry. Okay. So you respond. Think of it as like you have the privilege of reading this person's work, really like focus on it, engage with it. Think of it like a good book, right? Like really experience it and then respond. So, you know, first focus on how you read the piece, right? And then, so focus on how you read the piece, what you got from it, what was interesting, what was confusing. So respond. Then you can sort of provide specific feedback. So I have a few slides here just to talk through. Instead of doing this, instead of doing X, do Y, because I feel like these up at the top are things we often do. So instead of focusing on grammar, address the big issues first. So one thing I'll say about the grammar stuff is that yes, grammar is important, style is important. There's a lot of situations in which that stuff is kind of make or break. And I understand that and that it is important, but it's not more important than the overall message. And also, I think what happens when we focus on grammar, one, oftentimes I think that happens because we don't know what else to say, right? So it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to respond to this with because I don't really know what the purpose of this peer review is, but I know I can talk about grammar, so I'm just going to mark all of the errors. One, this is a rough draft. People oftentimes have not proofread, have not, you know, edited, things like that. So it's stuff that they could figure out on their own, first of all. And second of all, that can be really discouraging. Like think of a time when you got something back that's just like red, 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 red. It's not very inspiring or generative. And for this peer review, the focus is content and generation and you know, thinking about the purpose. And so we want to really capture that spirit. So, you know, the big issues. Does the writer meet their purpose? Do you have questions, right? Questions are a great strategy for peer review. And how are you reacting as a reader? Because you are a reader, you are a member of the audience. You're allowed to sort of share your reaction, and that's useful for them. A lot of these photo essays are really personal. And so it's like you as the reader get to respond to that author, and that author, like if it's a very personal topic, they have, you know, I think they need to see how other people might react to it, you know? Okay, second, another vague feedback, right? How many of us have gotten something, whether it's in a peer review or from a professor, including potentially me, instead, you know, something that just has something underlined with awk for awkward or what or question mark, right? That vague feedback that it's like, okay, they clearly didn't get it, but I don't know how to fix it because in my head it makes sense, right? So instead of general blanket things like that, you want to be specific. So ask your writer, did you mean whatever, right? That shows you how, or that shows them how you're interpreting it. And that's ultimately more helpful. Point directly to what you found confusing. If it's word choice, if it's structure, if it's the content, be specific. And also try to use more descriptive language than awkward. Because also, what does awkward even mean, right? It's one of those strange terms that is often used in writing feedback that really nobody knows exactly what it means, and it's incredibly subjective. So try to be as specific as possible. Third, right? So we kind of talked about this already, but you know, instead of marking up every single grammatical error you find, note patterns. So what I was saying before, that stuff is important. Absolutely, grammar mechanics is important. But one, it's a lot of work for you as the peer reviewer to sit there and fix somebody's paper. That's not the purpose. It's a waste of your time. They're the creator. They should be fixing those things. But what you can do is note patterns. So let's say you keep seeing commas that are in the wrong place or comma splices or punctuation, or there's a word that's continuously misspelled. Note them, and at the end tell them, hey, I noticed this pattern of this. Then it's up to them to fix it, because it's not, that's like not the purpose of peer review. And now that I'm thinking of something, I really want to go back to something that I didn't emphasize. So there's different stages in the writing process, right? There's brainstorming, then there's drafting, which is what you're doing. Then there's revision, and there's editing and polishing. Revision is like ideas, and that's what we're focusing on here for photo essay. It's like mostly the ideas, the clarity, things like that. Editing is that sort of polishing, mechanics, grammar, all that stuff. And so your task is really that response and that sort of content-driven analysis and reflection, not the smaller things. And again, that stuff's important, but it's just not really, you can do more than that, right? Like your role as the peer reviewer is bigger. Okay, and my last big one is, instead of only pointing out weaknesses, offer praise and critique, okay? And I think there's multiple reasons for this, but one, there's always something about a paper or an assignment that's positive. You want to show people what they're doing is effective, and that way they can keep that spirit going. So if there's something you really loved, point it out. Like, one, praise helps us, right? It motivates us, but also it helps them see, okay, this was really effective. I should keep doing this as opposed to these things that are not as effective. Okay, so praise and critique. You're there for both. Some other general suggestions that I think are helpful. So tie some of your comments into what we've discussed in class, right? We've talked a lot about the role of the photo essay, visual design, all of that good stuff. Tie that in. Questions, like I said before, are a great way to couch critique because it just helps us think through. It's a way to hedge. I think it's a good strategy. Again, kind and offer constructive feedback. Now, what do I mean by constructive? I think it's very easy to write down, this is bad, or this is wrong, or I don't like this, but that's not helping them do something about it. That's very unhelpful and not generative. So something like, I don't really understand this part, but perhaps you could do this, like giving suggestions, things that help them, not just things that break them down or discourage them. And I have to say this, like, I'm sure you're all very kind and really lovely with feedback. I've met almost all of you, really lovely humans. But I just want to say this and make it clear, right? So constructive feedback. And then finally, specific and overall feedback. Specific is kind of like, here's small things. Overall is like, generally, these are things I think you could do. And so the sheet that you're going to fill out guides you to do this. But I just wanted to highlight this if you're in another situation where you're doing peer review and there's not really a sheet or a prompt, I think here's specific things and here's overall some things I think you could do. I think that's really helpful. And again, like the review sheet is meant to help you build good peer review habits and to sort of structure. And the writer's note that, is at the top or in a different document is also designed to help you think through how you might respond effectively. Because again, I just think it's so hard to respond when you're just given this thing, right? You have to think about the goal, the purpose, all of these different moving parts. And especially with a photo essay, that's a very new genre for most of us. I think you have to think about the context of the peer review and the purpose of the assignment. So that's what I have for you. That's what your task is early this week, and then you'll get your great feedback, and then your final is due on Sunday night. So happy reviewing, and please let me know if you have any questions. Bye.